a lot together, and I am so proud to call him a friend, as well as Abby. I have such fond memories of our work together. I have really fun memories of when we once went to Canada, remember that, with all the Canadian Interparliamentarian Group. The work that we did on adoption when no one thought we could get anything done, and we stood up for a number of really important bills. The work that we did on travel and tourism, to make sure that we were able to, our country could compete with other countries around the world when it came to foreign tourists. The work that we did, one of my favorite ones was getting, when Senator Duckworth was pregnant and wanted to have permission to bring her baby on the floor just for the first year or 6 months when there were late night votes and the like. And I thought that was going to be really easy, and I told her we could get it done. And then every single month I looked at her and she was getting more and more pregnant, and I realized I wasn't accomplishing my job. Roy and I worked on that together, and one of my fond memories of that is Senator Hatch being surrounded by media and being asked about it. And he said, well, that's okay if we have one baby on the floor, but what if we have 10 babies on the floor? And I said, we already have 10 babies on the floor. But in any case, we were able to get that done. As Roy mentioned, on a more serious topic, the sexual harassment rules, we instituted training, but we also updated the rules, which were really, it's a very difficult issue working with Senator McConnell and working with Senator Schumer, as well as a House, to get that done. Our work on protecting election officials, Roy, having been a previous election officials, understood that. We had a bipartisan hearing with the Secretary of States from red states and blue states. That was a major moment for me, but probably the thing I most remember was on January 6th, when we had started the morning with this beautiful celebration and this ceremony of this walk with the young women with the mahogany boxes. Everyone here knows exactly what I'm talking about. Insurrection went on, and Roy showed so much leadership that entire day in working with his colleagues, because while the police were on the front lines, as we recognize today, Roy was doing a lot of work in working out how the process was going to work once we got through there. You know, he was the guy that made that work late into the night. And then in the end, at about 3:30 in the morning, it was Vice President Pence and Roy and myself, and those 3 pairs of pages with the mahogany boxes walking through the corridors where we know throughout the Capitol there was broken glass and spray painted columns. And Roy just kept doing his job. And afterwards, when we got to the House, we knew that democracy had prevailed. We came back to the Senate. Remember this, the sun was coming up. It's like 4 in the morning at this point, and we decided to go down to the parliamentarians' offices, which were destroyed. And one of the beloved members of our parliamentarian staff, a family picture, was on the floor, and the whole thing was a mess. And we stood there and committed that we were going to not just clean up the Capitol, improve the security, but make this all better. And that's kind of drove my work in the last year. But what I most remember about that particular moment at 4 in the morning is we walked out of that room that was ransacked, and Roy looked at me, and he looked at me with that typical Roy understatement, and he said, well, see you tomorrow morning. And I go, okay, Roy. And that's Roy. He did what he said he'd do. We did a report immediately on security in the Capitol. We got it done in 6 months with Senator Peters and Senator Portman about what had to be done. We made a bunch of changes. We hired a new chief, and we went on from there. Because for Roy, it's always, I'll see you in the morning. And we know, Roy, that we're going to see you in the morning, that you're not going to be a stranger, that you will stay a friend to so many of us. And thank you for your incredible service to the people of your state, to this Senate, and to the United States of America.
Madam President.
Senator from Mississippi.
Just very briefly, I've served in 3 legislative bodies during my lifetime: the Mississippi State Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives, and then since New Year's Eve of 2007 here in the United States Senate. I have never had a better friend in any legislative capacity than Roy Blunt. And so this is a very profound moment for me and a very emotional moment for me. If there was ever anyone who was a born legislator, that person is Roy Blunt. He sprang to this earth with the ability to understand a diverse group of individuals representing diverse parts of the country, both in the House and in the Senate, and to bring them together for a result. This country is so much better off because of the legislative skills and the legislative accomplishments of Roy Blunt. There are people who are well today who had been sick, and they're well because of the efforts of Roy Blunt. There are people alive today who would not have been had it not been for the legislative skill of Roy Blunt. This republic will go on, and this body will go on, of course, but there will be a void in this room, in this chamber, in this Senate because of the absence of Roy Blunt. I don't remember a finer legislator that I've ever served with, and it is my great honor to count him as a close friend forever and to salute his service today. And I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Maine.
Madam President, when Senator Roy Blunt announced that he would not seek re-election, he promised to finish strong. As has been the case throughout his public service, he has kept his word. Roy is not only an effective senator and a persuasive advocate, but as Senator Wicker just mentioned, he's also a good friend to so many of us. On the Appropriations Committee, we've worked together particularly closely when it has come to biomedical research aimed at preventing, treating, and curing Alzheimer's disease. The fiscal year 2022 funding bill included an historic $3.5 billion for Alzheimer's research, and that tremendous success would not have come about but for the leadership of Roy Blunt. It has been truly outstanding. He has extraordinary vision in understanding the need for biomedical research that produces the medical breakthroughs. The American people also saw Roy's effectiveness with the work that he did with Senator Burr on Operation Warp Speed. That was responsible for the development of the COVID vaccines in record time. No one thought that the partnership between the federal government and the private sector would be able to produce a vaccine so quickly. But Roy swept away the bureaucratic obstacles, he provided the funding, and most of all, he provided the vision. And as a result of Roy's work, we have a COVID vaccine that has saved the lives of so many people. Serving with Roy not only on the Appropriations Committee, but also on the Intelligence Committee, I've seen firsthand the extraordinary number of contributions that he has made to our country. He is an experienced and skillful legislator who has the vision to write policy that makes a real difference. Roy has mentioned the role that he's played as master of ceremonies for the inauguration of President Biden. At the time, he delivered brief remarks on the preamble to our Constitution, observing that it establishes the uniquely American principle that government derives its authority from we the people. Our ongoing mission to create a more perfect union is a continuing project, Roy noted, adding that, quote, "We are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be," end quote. Roy, you have played a key role in advancing that mission, and it has been such an honor to serve with you. I wish you, Abby, Charlie, and the rest of your family all the best in the years to come. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President,
Senator from Alabama.
Madam President, I'd first like to ask that my written statement be made part of the record in its totality. Madam President, Roy Blunt, I first met him when he was a whip in the House. We had some kind of conference going, and I thought, my gosh, he can count votes. He's the whip. He could count votes in the conference, too, and so forth. And then when he started running for the Senate, I was one of many over here that wanted to help him get here. And when he came in, as has been said here, he went right into the leadership because he is a leader, Roy. You got it in you. You're natural. It's in your bones, so to speak. And you've brought a lot to this Senate. I've worked with you on just about everything, but especially on the Appropriations Committee. And you've been stellar. You've got a great family. You've got a great wife. Have a son that was former governor of your state of Missouri. We would miss you, but I won't be one of the we's. I'll be gone too, but at the same time, they will miss you here because miss your reaching out to the other side to make things happen, reaching out to show that America's first, country's first, and reaching out just over the aisle and to others for natural friendship, which means life a lot up here and something we need to do more of. But we wish you well. You will do well in your next life, whatever that is, and maybe we'll see you again after January sometime. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, I rise today to remind my colleagues of what we've often heard. In Washington, if you want a friend, get a dog. Roy Blunt destroys that because Roy has been a true friend. Our relationship goes back to the House, though, Richard, he wasn't whip when I was there. And clearly he came in and the math got better. But Abby's a strong woman. She's put up with a lot, as have all of our spouses. And Abby, I hope you have a wonderful chapter in what's store for him next. I want to speak from a standpoint of chair of the Intelligence Committee and the fact that I work with 14 extraordinary people who understand up front that they're going to learn a lot, they're going to be faced with some tough decisions, and they're not going to be able to talk to their colleagues, their friends, their family about anything that goes on. There can be some rather difficult days to go through, as we've seen over the 18 years I've been in the Senate, and 16, 14, 12 that Roy's been in. But I've got to say that I never questioned whether Roy was going to be prepared, whether he was going to attend, whether he was going to absorb what he heard, and more importantly, whether he was going to make a prudent decision about what we do. I can say that he mirrors the other 13, Susan, you being one of them. And I think what Roy brings to this representation from Missouri is not only a man of character, but a true leader. I expected to hear in your farewell address the words of Harry Truman. And I'm paraphrasing when I say this because I can't remember the direct quote, but he was referencing all the things that we think about that we do. But Truman boiled it down to this: the only things that matter are what happens in this room, in the United States Senate. And as we all three of us think of our departures, I don't think Missouri yet understands the loss that they've got by not having Roy Blunt here. But I do understand this, that there are 99 other members of the Senate that understand what the Senate will lose with Roy Blunt's decision to retire. So for all the good that you've done, Roy, I wish you many years of success from this point forward. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, it's an honor to join with my colleagues to speak about someone that is a dear friend, and I have often said to Senator Blunt, you're not really leaving, I'm putting you in a closet and locking the door, and we're not letting you leave. But then I know that Abby and Charlie and your whole family would not appreciate that. We first met back in the 80s when Senator Blunt was the Secretary of State in Missouri, and I was a state legislature, and it was the first year that the national JCs went from 10 outstanding young men to 10 outstanding young Americans, and I had the honor of being one of 3 women honored that year. But we met in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Roy has often joked that we met in a hotel room, but then he quickly explains what that was to Abby. But we had the opportunity to be there together, and then it wasn't until 1996 election, we were both elected to the U.S. House. We are standing on the steps of the U.S. House outside to take a picture of the freshman class, 1997, or 96 it was, the end of the year. I turn around and Roy Blunt is standing right next to me. And I said, I know you. And we gathered together again and really struck up a friendship. And then we both were on the House Agriculture Committee, and the very first bill I think either of us ever introduced was this very exciting bill about wheat germ. And so I often was asked, what was the first bill I ever introduced? And it was a wheat disease bill. But Roy and I got it done, and went on to really form a wonderful friendship ever since. And I was very excited when he then joined us in the United States Senate. And as many people know, in addition to our having led the bills on community health centers, we have partnered together on a new concept of community behavioral health clinics, actually funding mental health and addiction services the same as physical health. And that started 10 years ago. And we stood on the floor of the Senate when we first introduced the bill and talked about how President John F. Kennedy had introduced, or had actually signed the last law he ever signed. Last act he ever signed, 1963, was an act to create community mental health centers. And the idea was to close at that time what they called asylums and give people community care, care close to home, families, support people to be able to be in the community and be successful. Well, the hospitals got closed, but the rest of it never happened. And so I'm so honored to have partnered and want to continue to partner with Roy as he leaves here for other things to move forward the rest of the story, which is effective community care for folks not in a jail, not in the emergency department, but in the community with their family, allowing them to be successful in work and living their lives because they're getting the care that they need. And so I'm very honored to have had the opportunity to work with Roy on that as well. Now, Senator Wicker was talking, I thought you might have said something about the trip that we took together to Asia with Senator Blunt. Senator Blunt was wonderful at putting together bipartisan trips, and we had the opportunity to go to a number of places in Australia, because part of everything else that he does is he's been one of the leaders in an inter-parliamentarian partnership with the United States of America and Australia, and I was pleased, I think last year, to see you receive a very significant honor here because of your work. But we had an opportunity to travel together with Abby, and to all of us be together and really showing a bipartisan front to other world leaders. I will say as an aside, you never want to play hearts with him because he's a very good card player. And I've often said I think he counts cards because he's so good. On a serious note, I'm really, Madam President, going to miss this gentleman from Missouri. Proud to have him as a friend, a partner, someone who really exemplifies what it means to be a statesman, to be a public servant. And I just send you all my best and all my love for you and your family. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator from Mississippi.
President, I ask unanimous consent that Senator Collins, Senator Inhofe, and I be allowed to give our remarks before the next vote.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. As we see, this is that difficult time of the year when we pause and say goodbye, farewell, and Godspeed to departing members of this body. Senator Collins and I are prepared to act as a team at this moment to wish the very best and pay tribute to two individuals, Richard Shelby of Alabama and Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma. Senator Shelby is a gifted legislator and Southern gentleman whose impact on this nation will not soon be forgotten. His colleagues and constituents know him for his long record of championing economic development as a champion in the House of Representatives and in the Senate for our military, as leader of the Appropriations Committee here in the Senate. Richard Shelby is the quintessential problem solver. He's always known how to sit down, negotiate, and get a result. And I wish him the best in this final month of his career and once again getting a result. Indeed, the jobs created through Richard Shelby's legislation and committee work number in the hundreds of thousands of jobs. So it's no surprise that there are now monuments to Richard Shelby's leadership all over Alabama and the entire nation. As his next-door neighbors across the state line, we Mississippians have directly benefited from his leadership. So I wish him and his wife Annette well as they begin the next chapter. And I now turn to my friend, the senior senator from Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe, a man that I've had the privilege of working with on the Armed Services Committee these last 14 years. Senator Inhofe represented Oklahoma for 28 years in this body and 6 years before that in the House of Representatives. In all of those years, he could always be counted on to attend every single Wednesday morning prayer breakfast and Thursday Bible study. One time he had to attend by telephone because he was called away by a family crisis, but we could always count on him. And he's been a close friend. He's been a close friend on both sides of the aisle to people like Barbara Boxer of California, Jack Reed of Rhode Island, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and Democratic leader Harry Reid. Perhaps it was those friendships that explain his mountain of legislative success, with bipartisan achievements that include 3 highway bills, 4 water resources and development acts, 7 National Defense Authorization Acts, including the current bill pending before this body, a bill which literally bears his name. But that success also came from his breadth of life experience. He understood how to create jobs because he himself had done that as a businessman for 30 years, working in aviation, real estate, and insurance. He understood the challenges of local government because he had been the mayor of Tulsa and a state legislator. As a leader on the Armed Services Committee, he could speak for our men and women in uniform because he had been one of them, having served in the Army. As a personal friend of Ronald Reagan, he never wavered in advocating for peace through strength. Oklahoma's 5 military bases are unquestionably better off today because of their staunch advocate, Senator Jim Inhofe. Thanks to his leadership, veterans have better facilities, our Air Force is better equipped, and the military now has AFRICOM as a distinct mission on the African continent. It bears saying that Senator Inhofe has a long-standing affection for Africa and the people of Africa. There's no one in Congress, or in the State Department for that matter, who can surpass his personal knowledge of African leaders. On a typical congressional delegation trip, he would hit an average of 12 countries in 10 days, covering 18,000 miles and meeting with civilian and military leaders at every stop. Always looking for an opportunity to pray with them, always visiting American troops. He's been to Africa more times than any member of Congress since America's founding. 172 visits on the African continent. When he isn't making law or traveling the globe or watching his grandson's athletic events, there's a good chance he's in the air somewhere flying a Cessna, because Senator Inhofe is also Pilot Inhofe, with nearly 12,000 hours of flight time, including a solo flight around the world. He will also be remembered for that 1991 trip in which he flew the flight path of Wiley Post, which went straight through Russian airspace. His Russian escort pilot even remarked on his outstanding piloting skills. As Jim Inhofe departs this chamber, he leaves behind a wealth of friends and an army of former staff whose talent and loyalty are a testament to the man himself. I know he will look forward to spending more time with his wife of 63 years, Kay, and his 20 grandchildren and his 20 children and grandchildren. Both of these gentlemen, both of these friends, Jim Inhofe and Richard Shelby, we will go down as titans of the Senate. Their enormous contributions to the good of our nation will not soon be forgotten, and we will miss their company. I wish them both farewell and Godspeed. And now I yield to my friend, the senator from Maine, Senator Collins, for her remarks about these two outstanding friends.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
Mr. President, what a pleasure it is to join Senator Wicker in paying tribute to our dear friends and outstanding colleagues, Senators Jim Inhofe and Richard Shelby. We could talk about their accomplishments on the floor for many, many hours, but in the interest of time, we're going to focus, as has my colleague from Mississippi, on their truly outstanding contributions to our national security, their unwavering commitment to the security of our nation and the well-being of our service members has been truly remarkable. Let me start with Jim Inhofe. A veteran of the United States Army, Jim has been a champion for enhancing our national security and providing our brave servicemen and women with the resources that they need to carry out their missions. Through his leadership of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jim has ensured that the Senate completed its annual work on the National Defense Authorization Act, and he has made countless contributions to the military that has made our country safer. His selection by the Association of the United States Army as its 2022 Legislator of the Year, recognizes his unwavering dedication for the total Army, our soldiers, our families, caregivers, and veterans. As a constitutional conservative, Jim firmly adheres to his principles while always being willing to seek out bipartisan compromises wherever possible. Jim has been a leader in strengthening the ties between the United States and the nations of Africa. As my colleague from Mississippi has mentioned, but I'm going to reiterate because it's so astonishing, Senator Inhofe has visited the continent of Africa an astonishing 172 times as a senator. He is particularly close to the nation of Ethiopia. It's close to his heart for many reasons, including the fact that it is the birthplace of one of his granddaughters. He puts his faith into action through his staunch support of Project Mercy, a nonprofit organization that has led the way in helping raise Ethiopians out of poverty and extreme hunger. The enduring friendships that Jim has made with both his Republican and Democratic colleagues here in the Senate reflect not only his ability to find common ground, but also his kindness, his good heart as well. I deeply value our friendship and our service together in the United States Senate. Let me now say a few words about another dear friend and extraordinary leader, Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama. As chairman and vice chair of both the Appropriations Committee and of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, Richard Shelby has dedicated himself to ensuring that the United States remains the world's most advanced and effective military force. He has ensured that our nation's service members are equipped with the tools that they need to protect and defend our country. I know that the people of Alabama are so proud of his countless contributions to his state. He's worked tirelessly to support the service members, veterans, and defense industry workers who call Alabama home. Redstone Arsenal, Maxwell Air Force Base, and Fort Rucker are all vital national hubs for various military commands and activities due to the leadership of Richard Shelby. Richard's legislative influence has been extraordinarily broad. He has chaired 4 Senate committees: Appropriations, Rules, Intelligence, and Banking, where he holds the record for the longest tenure of committee membership. His extensive knowledge, combined with the deep bonds that he has forged with his fellow members of Congress in both the Senate and the House, has enabled him to compile an extensive list of accomplishments. Serving with Richard on the Appropriations Committee, I've witnessed firsthand his command of policy and his skill as a negotiator. He truly is a master legislator, always focused on securing tangible results. One example that stands out occurred in 2018 when he took over as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Under his leadership, the fiscal year 2019 defense bill marked the first time that America's military had been funded on time through regular order in a decade. Richard Shelby did it. Richard has always also played a crucial role in positioning our country as a leader in scientific achievement, advancement, exploration, and discovery. He looks to the future, placing a premium on funding innovative research in areas such as hypersonics, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. From the early days of the space race to today, Alabama has been a vital hub of cutting-edge research on propulsion and space systems, particularly through the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville. Richard has consistently ensured that funding would be there for NASA to preserve America's superiority in the final frontier. Mr. President, as their service in the United States Senate draws to a close, Senator Jim Inhofe and Senator Richard Shelby will go down in history and long be remembered for their dedication to our armed forces and their determination to keep America free and strong. Their legacy will continue to inspire all of us to meet the challenges that lie ahead. I thank all of them. I thank both of them. I thank their wives, Kay and Annette, for their service as well. And it's a great pleasure to join with my colleague, Roger Wicker, in paying tribute to two extraordinary senators. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent to make 5-minute remarks before the vote is called.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to get to the floor today to say thank you to some colleagues that are truly deserving of it. There's 3 of them here. My understanding is that Senator Shelby, or the chairman as I call him, has not yet made his farewell speech. So I'm going to reserve my laudatory comments for somebody who I will always consider the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, even when he's the ranking member and even when he is not here. He is truly the chairman, and I have learned so much from him and am deeply appreciative for his incredible work and want to talk about that at greater length after he has made his floor speech. I do want to take opportunity, though, to thank Senator Jim Inhofe for his incredible leadership of the Military Affairs Committee, Senate Armed Services, excuse me, and his dedication, his commitment to our military. In North Dakota, we have the Minot Air Force Base, and we have the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So I'm particularly appreciative that Senator Inhofe is, in fact, a pilot, because not only is he a steadfast advocate for our military in every respect, but as a pilot, certainly the Air Force is something that he understands, appreciates, and has provided incredible support for the amazing work that our men and women in uniform in blue do. And as I've worked on issues related to my state and to the Minot Air Force Base and the Grand Forks Air Force Base, without exception, when I've gone to Chairman or Ranking Member Inhofe for discussions and help on issues important to the Air Force in general, but certainly to our bases, he has been there, and his understanding and his commitment to listen, to truly be a gentleman, to listen, and to consider what it is you're working on. He wasn't always able to do it just the way you hoped maybe it should get done, but he always made sure that he worked through the issue in a fair way and came to a good result. And in many cases, that result occurred in the near term. Sometimes it took a little longer. But I think that commitment to consider everybody's point of view and work with both sides of the aisle, his relationship with current Chairman Jack Reed, I think, is remarkable. and I think the two of them leading our Armed Services Committee has made a big difference. Their relationship and how they approach things, which in many ways is similar, is the reason we've been able to get the NDAA legislation passed across the floor, even at times when it's been very difficult to do. They've led the way, and I know that they're working hard and will continue to lead the way again this year on the NDAA, and Senator Inhofe will be deeply missed. He is truly a friend and an advocate for our military, and his incredible devotion and commitment to them will be missed. And we thank him for it, and for as a colleague, the way he has approached every issue that he has worked on during his time here in the United States Senate. I also want to thank and extol for just several minutes Senator Roy Blunt. I think anybody that's worked with Senator Blunt will tell you that he is incredibly intelligent. And he's one of those people that you realize how smart he is, not because of how much he says, but actually sometimes how little he says, meaning he can express thoughts and concepts so cogently. And that takes a very sharp mind to actually say something profound in the minimum number of words, not a long and rambling speech. And he has common sense that sometimes you don't realize until you've worked with him a little bit and just listened to him a little bit. And he's played a prominent role as a member of our leadership team. I've worked with him on appropriations as well, on the Appropriations Committee with our able chairman, as I mentioned earlier. But invariably, what I have found that when you talk to Senator Roy Blunt, if what you're talking about makes common sense, he's almost always there. He is one of the most pragmatic, well-reasoned, thoughtful senators that we have. And again, in a way, he's a master of the understatement where, like I say, in just a few words or a cogent thought, he can get to the heart of the issue. I want to just go through one story about him before I yield the floor, and that is when I first came in as a senator in 2011, having worked as governor for our state in North Dakota for the prior decade. One of the things that immediately came up when I met Roy Blunt and talked to him about issues is the Missouri River. North Dakota's on the north end, obviously Missouri's on the south end. And we have some different ideas about how the water in the Missouri River should be managed and utilized for the great people of our respective states and all the people in between. And as they used to say in the West, and probably still do, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And we battled on every imaginable issue that you can think of on the Missouri River. And Senator Kit Bond, a former senator from Missouri, and our senators were at loggerheads all the time on water issues relative to the great Missouri River. And so right off the bat, actually, Senator Blunt sought me out and he said, you know, our predecessors did nothing but fight on the Missouri River. Let's see if we can't figure out a way where we can work together. And so I said, gee, that sounds good to me. So the first thing we did is we set up a trip, and we started at the north end. We actually started at Fort Peck in Montana and went all the way, starting on the north end, all the way down, from the northwest all the way down to the southeast end of the river. Ended up in St. Louis, Missouri, stopped all along the way at all of the dams and the reservoirs and every place of significance, talked about the issues, tried to understand what everybody needed. And I have to say, over the last 12 years, I'm not sure we agreed on every aspect of managing the Missouri River, but the vast, vast majority. And I think both of our states and the states in between have benefited from that, and we've been able to do, I think, some remarkable things with the Corps of Engineers because we took that approach to see if we couldn't figure out how to work together on something of tremendous consequence, not only for both of our respective states, but for the country. And that's the kind of leadership, that's the kind of common sense and wisdom that Roy Blunt brought to this job every day. And so to Roy and to Abby, friends of Mike and I, we we will truly miss him. Our conference will truly miss him. This institution will truly miss Senator Jim Inhofe and Senator Roy Blunt. And they're going to miss the chairman too, but I'll talk about him on another occasion. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that my floor statement on the judge we're about to vote on be able to be completed before the vote. Thank you very much. Having risen already to speak about Senator Blunt, I also want to say my thanks and best wishes to Senator Inhofe and Senator Shelby. I had an opportunity in the EPW committee to speak more about my work with Senator Inhofe, but to both of you, we deeply appreciate your service to our country. Mr. President, I rise today in strong support of Judge F.K. Beam, whom President Biden nominated to serve on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. Judge Beam represents the very best of Michigan. She and her 4 siblings grew up on a dairy farm in Alma, milking cows and baling hay and driving tractors and doing all of the other tasks that life on a farm demands. During the 1980s farm crisis, her parents nearly lost the farm. That experience changed Judge Beam forever. It led her to pursue degrees in business and law so that she could help other Michigan families. She graduated from Albion College and the University of Michigan Law School. She worked in private practice for 15 years. And in 2009, she was appointed as a trial judge in Genesee County by Governor Jennifer Granholm. During her time as a judge, she's never forgotten her humble roots. And she's worked hard to ensure that everyone who appears before her is truly seen and heard. As a judge on the Genesee County Circuit and probate courts, Judge Beam has presided over cases related to criminal, civil, juvenile, and probate matters. In 2011, she led a 2-year pilot program in Genesee County to hire and use social workers to improve outcomes in child protective services proceedings. After the pilot program produced a positive result, Judge Beam worked with her staff to develop the intensive family support program to support parents and families involved in the child welfare system. As a family court judge, Judge Beam has presided over approximately 1,600 bench trials and 3 jury trials. And since 2019, Judge Beam has presided over 16 bench trials and 18 jury trials. The American Bar Association gave Judge Beam a unanimous rating of well qualified to serve on the federal bench. She also finds time to serve on the board of directors of the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Flint. I have no doubt, Mr. President, that Judge Beam will continue to serve the people of Michigan well on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. And I would urge my colleagues to support her nomination. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the question is on confirmation of the Beam nomination. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt,